welcome to episode 83 of the Craft House Magic podcast. My name's Ellie and I'm coming to you from Norwich in Norfolk in the UK. Today's the 12th of September. So welcome everybody. I hope you've all had a lovely crafty week since the last time I've spoken to you. And I'm here to share all the crafty things that I've been up to in the last 7 days. So today we have some knitting, some crochet, some sewing, some confessions. Only a little confessions. And some information on my shop update, which is this Friday at 7 p.m. So you can find me on Instagram, Ravelry and Facebook as Craft House Magic, and I have my own website, crafthousemagik.co.uk, where you can find the show notes for this podcast, as well as some things I've got for sale in my shop, including project bags, hand-dyed yarn and accessories such as stitch markers, etc. So first thing I need to tell you about is the next sort of Norwich meetup, which we've decided to call Barbara's Day Out. It's going to be on the 6th of October from 12 until 3 at the Nelson Hotel. So we're trying a new venue. Hopefully that'll be okay. So I've chosen the Nelson Hotel because it's quite close to the train station, but there's also parking at Riverside there if you need to park if you're driving, so there's different means of travelling there, so you've got your options open. I think it's always nice to be able to get to places by train because you can knit or crochet on the train or lots of other crafts, I'm sure. So I've been thinking we need some make-alongs. We've just finished the summer sock-along, so I've decided to have a country garden knit-along because I've had patterns out for ages and I think maybe we should just open a knit along where actually if you've been knitting on something for a while, that's fine. And also I'll have a finished objects thread separately from a discussion thread, so if you've already finished you can pop your finished objects in there so I can draw for prizes for those of you that have purchased the pattern already, as a bit of a thank you as well, to thank you for purchasing the pattern and supporting me in my little business. So that's going to be opened up after I've finished recording the podcast. Also, I've decided that we need a Halloween craft along, which is sort of related to some of the yarns that I'm going to be releasing on this Friday's update, as well as a project bag set and notions pouch, etc. So you'll see that at the very end of the podcast. But also it doesn't mean that you have to knit with my sort of Halloween themed yarns, but I just thought it might be nice to have a Halloween themed sort of make along together, because I've got really in the Halloween mood at the moment. So if I start that over in the Ravelry group, and we can have a discussions thread and a finish objects thread for that as well. And of course that'll finish on, say, the 1st of November, so to give people time, an extra day to pop all their finished objects and finish their chatting off over in the discussion group. So that's 2 knit-alongs, but also I've decided we need 3 knit-alongs all at the same time. So I'm also going to do a Christmas craft along for this year as well. So this will run right up until the 1st of January from now, just to allow you to make either gifts for people, anything Christmas related, and it's going to be a complete make along, so you can make anything. So it can be sewn, lace making, knitting, crochet, absolutely anything. Love to hear what you're making for Christmas. So we'll have just a discussion thread for that one, I think, rather than finished objects, so that we can get ourselves all in the mood for getting our Christmas projects finished or Christmas gifts finished in time for Christmas, so that we can sit and relax in December. That's what I said last year, didn't I? So there we go. 3 knit-alongs or craft-alongs over in the Ravelry group. So that's all the sort of waffling on at the beginning of the podcast. Let's get on with the crafty stuff. So knitting first. I have a finished object. So I showed you that I'd done one sock on the last podcast, and I'd made these socks from a sock tube that me and Mum had knitted together, and I'd split the tube into 4 pieces, and these are the other 2 pieces. I'd already finished a pair. They look pretty much the same as this, but the first pair, the cuff was in the same yarn as the main colour, and I'd just done contrast heels and toes. This one I've used the contrast on the cuff as well. So the yarn I used for the main colour is a Knitalongs yarn in the colourway Wizardry, that's it. So that's a Wizardry colourway by Knitalongs, and then I've used my own Living on a Prayer colourway to do the heels, toes and cuffs on here. So you can find a tutorial on my channel for how I turn a sock tube into 2 pairs of socks. I'll leave a link to that in the show notes as well. I think that's all I've got to say about these. One thing I did is that I knitted the main sock and 2.25mm needles. I can't say that. 2.25mm needles, and actually Mum pretty much did the main sock bit, and then I've added heels and toes. And I did 72 stitches so that it'd be quite a tight gauge but large enough to go over Adam's feet. There we go, there's another pair of socks finished. I have got an idea of a tutorial I wanted to do for where I actually make sure that I've got no holes or anything where you cut into the foot. Sometimes you get a little bit of a gaping bit there, and I was going to do a little bit of a mini tutorial of how I close that up. Whether I'll get time to do that today or next week, I'll see how I get on, but watch out for that. So that's my sort of finished object for this week. So on my needles for knitting at the moment, I've just finished a sock of my Pebbles and Pathways sock. And this is a gorgeous pattern by lovely Mars Smith, who's Mars from the Hey Brown Berry podcast. She's got a wonderful podcast, so don't forget to check her podcast out. I am in love with this pattern. It's got a gorgeous garter stitch top there, beautiful cables, and then this heel. Oh, love it. So I have a relatively high instep, and I've tried this sock on, even though this is supposed to be for Adam. And I love the feel of how this heel fits. I haven't obviously blocked these properly, so they're not as neat as they would look once they've finished blocking, but I'm finding this so comfortable. I'm definitely going to knit this type of heel again. And I've done quite a few sort of toe-up socks, but sometimes it puts me off that I have to do a sort of short row heel. It doesn't give me so much room for the instep really when I do toe up. But now I've tried Mars's pattern, I'm going to be doing this heel, even with different patterns on the top of the foot, etc., even if it's a plain sock. But for toe up, this is the heel I'm going to stick to, I think. Really pleased with that. So you can see I've got a little stitch marker there. I actually I turned this this was actually a necklace I had from Accessorize years ago, and the chain went all funny, so I actually used the little charm to put on a lobster clasp to use as a progress keeper. So I think that's really cute. So this marker is just showing where I started my increases so that I can make the second sock match. Save me having to sort of find that point at a later time. And I've already started the second sock, and I've done that much so far. I am using my own hand-dyed yarn, and this is a BFL base, 80% BFL, 20% nylon, and this is the Way You Make Me Feel colourway. So it's a nice sort of bright blue with speckles of like a purpley blue in amongst that as well, so it's like a tonal base as well. So that's on the needles at the moment. I had to actually stop myself just from knitting on those socks so that I had more things to show you guys. So my last work in progress to do with knitting is my antler cardigan, and I have about 17 inches on the needles now, so it's worked from the bottom up and it's worked flat. And I've just started doing some short rows on the bust area. So what I'm doing is similar to like a heel turn on a sock, where I've worked out where I sort of want the dart to reach to, so it's kind of like a dart doing these decreases. So I've knitted up until the point where I want my dart to reach on the garment, and I've done knit 2 together, knit 1, work back, and then work back to that point and knit 2 together with a gap. So it's like I'm doing a heel turn, but I'm making a sort of a heel flap there, but it's basically like a boob pocket, yes. I've put these stitch markers on there, so, well, progress keepers I should say. So I'm trialling these actually. I might have these in my shop if I get on with the little charms okay, but they're numbered 1 to 9. so that you're able to sort of mark on your work a count of something. So I could then, say if I had like 12, I could use the 1 and 2 charms next to each other to mark something together. This is the thinking anyway, but I'm going to try them out and see if I like them, and if I still like them after I finish this project, I'm thinking about having those in the shop as well. So I'm working one side of the bust first, and once I've done that side, I'll knit all the way to the other side and do the same on the other, so that I have decreases. So the main body of the cardigan fits nicely around my bust, and then there's decreases up to this armpit bit, and then the when I'm actually knitting the shoulders, it's a smaller size so that it isn't too big at the top and still fits me around the bust, if that makes sense. There we go. I haven't done sort of traditional method of short rows, because if you're decreasing, it kind of closes the gap that it causes when you're doing a short row. So there we are. So the colourway, oh, I forgot to say the colourway. The colourway I'm using here is my own hand-dyed yarn in my Living on a Prayer colourway. And this base isn't one that I normally stock in my shop, but it's got 85% merino and 15% Donegal nep in there, so I'm trying that out to see if I like it as well. So there we go. That is all the knitting I've been working on this week, but I seem to have done quite a bit of crochet. I have a finished crochet object, and it's a dishcloth. So this pattern is a Lion Brand free pattern for making a dishcloth, and it's not a very easy title to find, so I will link the pattern in the show notes, but it's got this cool textured pattern across the whole of the dishcloth. And I've done it in 5 repeats, but it just says to keep repeating the pattern until you've made it square. Mine isn't 100% square, but I wanted to make it kind of even, if that makes sense, so that I've got 5 repeats across there. I really like this pattern, and I think, I'm not quite sure whether I'll keep using it as a dishcloth really, but I'll try this one out, and if I like it I'll make some more. If not, I think this pattern actually makes quite a nice pattern for a face cloth sort of thing, with a nice textured stitch in there to get those dry skin cells off your face. So there we go. I used 67 grams of Knit Picks Dishy yarn, and this is in a pale pink colourway. I've got 33, something like that, 30 something grams left, so I could probably use what's left with another colourway to make a second dishcloth as well. But it's nice that I can get a whole dishcloth out of one of the skeins of Dishy, so I'll be making some more of those, I think. So I've also been working on my corner to corner crochet blanket, and it seems like I've worked loads on this, but it doesn't seem to be sort of growing in depth very much, but it is getting quite a lot wider, so that's how I've got on so far. So for this I'm using a 4mm crochet hook, and I'm using the corner to corner crochet pattern that Bella Coco had a YouTube video for. I will leave a link to that in the show notes. I am using 2 yarns held together, so I am using a magic knot ball where I'm joining all my little scraps together so that I don't waste it. So anything that's more than that long, I'm included it. I have a tutorial for the magic knot as well, so I'll leave a link to that in the show notes as well. But I'm also holding it double with some undyed yarn. So this is a merino nylon base that I have in my shop, and it's just undyed, and I think that with it being lots of different colours, it's nice to sort of tone it together with one colour to keep it sort of consistent across the blanket. And it's coming along quite nicely. My idea is that I'm going to make it as long as my coffee table. And it's going about halfway along there, so it's going to be a bit longer than it is now, and then once it's got to that width, I'm then going to make it a rectangular shape. So I'm going to decrease on one side and keep increasing on the other to make it a rectangle. But I love this texture, gorgeous, really pleased with how that's coming along, really lovely. So I've got some sewing next, so Barbara is going to come and show you what I've been making, but it's not quite finished yet, so bear that in mind. Come on then, Barbara. So Barbara is wearing my new top that I've been working on. if you look closely, I've got pins still holding the binding around the neck that I haven't sewn down yet, so it's not finished. I haven't done the sleeve hem or the bottom of the hem yet. But I actually drafted this pattern myself from scratch. So last week I was talking about how I'd got like a cotton t-shirt that I'd sort of copied, and then I was going to use this fabric to make a copy of it. But when I actually put the pattern on the material wasn't wide enough to get a top out of this material. I thought, well, rather than just wasting it and not using it, I wanted to make something out of this fabric in particular. I'd actually use my pattern I drafted on a course that I did at Norwich City College quite a few months ago. Thought I'd actually get and use the pattern that I'd made up. So the course actually said about picking up this book. And this pretty much tells you all the things that I learnt on the course about having to draw your own pattern out. So say if you've got a funny shape like I am, I've got quite narrow shoulders, relatively large bust and wide hips. If you draw your pattern out, rather than having to adjust the pattern each time, you've then got a sort of template that you can follow in order to get everything to fit you. So I'll leave a link in the show notes to where I got this book. I think I picked this one up from Amazon, if you wanted to pick that up as well. So I used the front fitted bodice instructions in the book to make this pattern, and then the back pattern is just the standard back panel, because there is a fitted back bodice as well where there's some darts across here, but I thought, well, I want it to be a bit fitted but not too fitted, because this cotton fabric is a nice cotton lawn that would drape relatively nicely. So if you didn't watch the podcast last week, I picked this fabric up from a lovely shop in Holt called Something Special, which we had a day out there, down there. I had to just pick up some fabric, of course. And I managed to just get this top out of 1 metre of fabric. I think I had to fiddle around with it a little bit, so ideally I would have been better off buying more fabric, but I don't like wasting too much fabric anyway. So this front panel is all cut in one piece, and then there's some bust darts in there as well. And then I used a sleeve pattern that I'd also drafted, but I obviously cut it short so that I could get it out of 1 metre. Plus, I think if it's a nice summery cotton top, it's nice to have a nice short sleeve on there as well. So I gathered the sleeve at the top over here, and I did actually gather the stitches over 3 inches on either side of the centre seam. But I could probably got away with gathering it just in a smaller area. I've kind of just guessed really, because obviously I drafted the pattern myself. So it's just a bit of trial and error really, but I'm relatively happy with how it fits, it's fine. I've used the neckline actually off the pattern that I drafted from the top that I bought last week. So I'd kind of just made the pattern myself, and I laid this on top of the pattern that I'd then drawn out from scratch and worked out where I wanted the neckline. So it's a relatively high neckline, and I've used bias binding tape to finish that off, but I haven't finished top stitching it off yet. A couple of people had actually asked me whether I'd do a little tutorial on how I finish the things off with bias binding, so I might do that in a couple of weeks' time. If everyone's interested in that as well. I'm thinking of finishing the sleeves off with some bias binding, but I'm going to turn the bias binding tape to the inside so you can't see it on the sleeves, because I think it might be a bit too much of the contrast colour if I did have it showing on the outside. So obviously you can see the bias binding tape here, and I'm going to top stitch it so that there's a little bit of contrast just around the neck. And I'm going to do bias binding tape around the bottom as well, and again I'll turn that to the inside. But it's coming along quite nicely, and hopefully when I finished it I can actually show you what it looks like on me rather than just Barbara, because Barbara's probably a bit slimmer than me. But I do love this fabric, and I think it'll be really nice and cool to wear in the summer months. Even though we're coming to the end of summer now, it'll be ready for next year. So thank you very much, Barbara, and I shall be getting on to the next section. So we now have confessions. Very, very little confessions. I don't think think I showed these on the last podcast anyway. So I spoke about how I'm going to be joining in with the Nature's Walk Cal, which is going to be led by Sandra from Lovely Cherry Heart podcast. She's just releasing a new pattern on the 24th of this month, and the beautiful Nature's Walk pattern and kit is available from Black Sheep Wools, and I managed to purchase one. So I needed a nice new squishy crochet hook to go with it. So the pattern says that you need a 3.5mm hook. So I picked up one of those in the Clover Amore type of crochet needles, because I'd been trialling out some different types of needles, and I found that this was my favourite. Plus, it's quite a nice bright pink. And of course, when I was purchasing that, I saw that the 4.5 was in blue, and I hadn't got that size, so I thought, well, I'll buy that just in case I need to go up a crochet hook size. So I've now got the 3.5, and I've got the 4mm hook, which I've been using on my corner to corner crochet blanket, and now I've got the 4.5, so that should cover me in case I need to change my crochet hook size. I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well if you want to get hold of that. And last section is my shop update section. So I'm very excited to introduce a new Halloween bag. So the theme is cauldron. So I've used my standard medium bag shape, but I've introduced some flames at the bottom of the black cauldron, and then there's some potion that's dripping down the side, so that when you close it up, you have this sort of cauldron shape. I did some free motion stitching and applique on the flames there, and the flames are actually just on one side, but on the back I've done my name and a little free motion stitched cauldron there with a little spoon in there stirring the potion. And on this side I've got some applique where I've free motioned some bubble shapes in there. Hopefully you can see that. And this one's a drawstring, but I will make them available in zip ones if you want those. But I think because it's a drawstring, it's nice to sort of open like that, because it looks more like a cauldron. Inside there is actually some yarn in there I've just popped, but it's all black inside with some pockets, because I thought actually the potion is your yarn that's going in the bag. But of course, if you did want to have like the flames or the green potion colour inside, I'm happy to do that for you. Just leave a note in your order. So again, this is a medium sized bag, and I've also made some little notions pouch and things to go with it. So I chose to use the red as the outside, and I've just free motion stitched some flames on the outside there, and this includes a little cauldron progress keeper as well. And that's all black inside. And I did it with the flame fabric on the outside, because if you're putting this in a black bag when it's black on the outside, I'm not sure whether you'd be able to find it. So I've used the nice bright flame fabric so that you can find it easily if you do have it to go with one of your cauldron bags. I have the circular needle case to go with it, so you put your circular needles in there, roll that up, and then you can use the elastic to hook over the button. Does work better when you've actually got needles in there, to hook over the button, and that keeps your needles from sticking into your work. I have a DPN case which is also free motioned with the flames, and a scissor case to go with it as well. But I am happy to do different, if you did want the black on the outside with the flames on the inside, or the pea green like I've used as the goop on the outside potion of the bag, I'm happy to do that colour as well. Also, I thought that I did do it in like a goopy green potion colour, but I do have like a deep purple, so if you did want a deep purple potion instead of a green, I'm happy to do that as well. So that's my sort of new bags in the shop. But I also have some new yarn, which I'm very excited to introduce. So the first one is Thriller, and very iconic 80s song. So I had to have that as a colourway. And this is a nice deep cherry red tonal. And it's obviously supposed to be blood, but it sounds a bit gross, but I love this cherry red colour. I think that it works really nicely with black. So I've dyed up some minis there in black, because I think that goes really nice with them. So you could have a sock set if you wanted to. This black actually has some darker tones of grey in it rather than being a solid, so these are tonals rather than completely solid colours because they are hand dyed. And I am thinking of dyeing this as a separate colourway as well. I'm thinking I'm going to call it Black Hole Sun to be the Soundgarden song, because that is one of my favourite songs of all time. But I will offer that as a set if you want to knit some socks with the deep red in my Thriller colourway. My second new colourway is Garden of Shadows, which is also Halloween themed, and there's 3 different greys in there, but with some brown as well. So my idea is that I was listening to a song called Come Little Children that's from the Hocus Pocus film, and she talks about Garden of Shadows. So the idea behind this yarn is that it's the silvery moon with the dark shadows there, but the brown is the sort of dirt in the graveyard, and there's no sort of things living in the graveyard because it's very mysterious and Halloween-like. And this is how I come up with this colourway. So, but actually, I really like those 2 together as well. And I'm thinking that maybe those 3 colours would make a really nice shawl. They're not too in your face Halloween. So there we go. Oh, and actually I thought I might also offer Garden of Shadows with an optional mini of my pumpkin patch as well, because I think that goes quite nicely. But I'm also going to offer the Thriller colourway with that, because I think that's probably my favourite. Adam says he likes those 2 together better, but I will give you the option whether you want a mini in either of those, but you can also buy them separate as well. So like normal, in my website you can order the colourways in all of my bases, well, apart from the camel and silk, because it's a different base colour, it won't come out the same. But merino, nylon, BFL, MCN, singles, all those bases are available in all the colourways, so you can order those whenever you like. Those will be available on Friday at 7 p.m. So everything, the bags, the yarn, will be all available tomorrow, Friday, 7 p.m. GMT +1. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more, and I shall see you on next week's podcast. Bye!